Spiegel is you're talking about some of the covers and some of the provocative covers that you guys have done in the past. In fact, that's Spiegel is well known for
Yes.
pushing provocative cover imagery, which to me makes me
The
want.
bush warriors and
Yeah,
yeah,
totally,
yeah,
totally,
yeah, yeah,
totally.
yeah.
Now, this makes me, actually want to introduce into this conversation the role of aesthetics in
Mm.
journalism, which feels like something that really comes online at late orange, right? And becomes really sort of, oftentimes put in the spotlight at the green stage of development. And I think it's interesting because, I think also our notion of, political satire, political cartoons, things like that also emerge out of, really late orange, where we start having that sort of self-reflexivity where we can, make these sort of embedded
Yeah,
subjects into
yeah.
objects and, turn it into an aesthetic that sort of makes a point. I think that, Spiegel magazine's doing the same thing. Now, I know that you sort of located Spiegel in that late orange category, knowing that all of these social hold-ons are, you can't really peg any of them, right? I mean, they all kind of
Yeah.
they waver, they go up and down, just like we individually do. Would you consider Spiegel's emphasis on aesthetics? I mean, it really leads with aesthetics on this cover. Not only is it an orange kind of marketing gimmick, but you're trying to say something with those aesthetics. You're trying to get into people's interiors and give them a flash of perspective that allows them to sort of enact this topic in a different way, to see it in a different way than maybe they would see if they only read an article, for example. So it seems to serve kind of both purposes. Like, we'll sell more magazines with this, but we'll also create a different kind of understanding or a different sort of source of meaning,
Mm.
right, in terms
Mm.
of what we're discussing in this issue of the magazine.
Mm.
Does that to you
Mm.
feel like a green aspect of Spiegel,
Yes,
or?
yes. So in good weeks, yes.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, the cover of last week, for example, I liked a lot, which was so it wasn't another war picture, like another horrible war picture, but it was, yeah, inside Putin's head as far as you can go inside, and like with these weapons and in this aesthetic of I think, pre-Soviet art, something. That's what they told it was.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, in good weeks, yes, and a lot of times not really, but.
Fair enough.
This week, yes, I liked a lot.
It is interesting though, right? Because art
It's very
art
interesting.
art
Very
comes with
interesting.
its own kind of truth claims, you know?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's also, I'm sure you know it. I guess you know all the lines that have ever been postulated. So this by Abigail Hausen, the aesthetic line of development, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah,
Yep.
it could be the green, like what it creates in you, like to give all the interpretation power to the audience and let them somehow, yeah,
And it makes sense.
create something, give a projection, like a wide board of projection, and yes,
Right.
yeah,
Well, and it makes sense too to talk about this in terms of sometimes the aesthetics do sort of take the lead. I mean, Ken has talked again, time and time again, about how the artists are often sort of the diamond tip of culture who have the permissions to explore territories that the rest of us don't
yep,
have permission to explore yet. So oftentimes the artists are the ones who are sort of downloading the aesthetics of the future, right? And bringing them sort of meshing those aesthetics with our present day activities. So it would make sense to me anyway for a magazine like Spiegel, which maybe you can say, the center of gravity of our written content is largely late orange, but the center of gravity of the aesthetics is going to be green, or maybe even occasionally teal in some cases. You'll probably naturally see a bit of a gap between the written content versus the aesthetic content. And of course, written content also has its own aesthetics. I mean, good writers know how to, write beautiful prose. And that's also an important part of the content itself. But, when you have sort of visual versus linguistic, it's not too surprising at all to me that you would see maybe a stage or two difference, between how they're being presented.
yeah. Maybe let's, yeah, find just remember a good example I could show you, which is from the website, which is much more green, I would say, than the magazine.
Oh, yeah.
So So this was the story we did in China. I mean, this is maybe the most integral journalism we did so far. But speaking about aesthetics, I mean, maybe that's I don't know if that's a green approach or a teal approach. So the idea was I mean, this story took 5 years, and we talked to people who were in the same labor camp at the same time. So several people, and we chose 3 of them and told their stories, and also the stories of their families and their colleagues and their work environment and so on. So I mean, this was supposed to be a book, and we decided to do it in a multimedia special, or as I would call it, a mixed media special, because it's not just combining different kinds of media, but it's actually merging them together. So somehow just not showing a whole video, but just putting a small video sequence in between and then continue with the text. And there's like all these field recordings we did behind the text. And the thing that I wanted to tell as an example was that so we had a lot of things we couldn't photograph and film, right? Because they were inside the labor camp. And of course, don't get a press appointment in the labor camp. And so we had to somehow like do the interviews. And if like 3 or more people were telling the same thing, then we could be quite sure that it is true and that it happened more or less like this. And we took some of these scenes and we somehow reconstructed these memories in so I explain later. So we reconstructed these memories in animations, but they have a certain style, and that's important. So
他在西山平台，他是睡觉12点钟才允许你上床，然后他中途还要叫你起来去站岗啊，或者说去看其他劳教人员有没有那种上吊的啊，要自杀的啊，要让你去守夜。
It's around 11 at night on October 29th, 2009. I'm sitting with a few dozen others from my village in a bus. We're on our way home after filing a petition with the provincial government in the city of Chongqing.
他说没他那99块的安置费，我就请问下你们那9000块的安置费拿来喝了酒了吗？还是来干了啥子了？
The bus pulls over onto the side of the road, and I suddenly see dozens of police cars. What do they want from us? We didn't do anything wrong. We're only fighting for our rights, for adequate compensation. They want to build a reservoir where our village is located. They want to resettle everyone living there. They also want my family and me to leave our farm, which has belonged to my ancestors for close to 100 years. The bus comes to a stop. Through the window, I can see 2 police officers approaching. One of them is armed. He suddenly yells my name.
Li Yiwen.
I slowly make my way to the door.
Wow. Beautiful animation. And it conveys sort of the brutality, and it's amazing how much resonance and aesthetic sensibility to journalism can create. and even looking at this story, just the first couple minutes here, I mean, you're recounting someone's point of view from the first person.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And wrapping it, drenching it really in a particular aesthetic that conveys this sense of brutal oppression. And, of course, the green stage loves to fixate on sort of the victim oppressor dynamic, but that doesn't mean that only belongs to the green stage. I mean, you can be fully teal, turquoise, and beyond and still care about oppression and victimization. You might have a different set of calculations to help you determine who is the oppressor and who is the victim, and what, more importantly, what to do about it, how to intervene. But, this narrative of victim and oppressor really does come online in a very, very strong way at the green altitude and beyond. And I think that this piece that you've shown so far really conveys that in a beautiful and sort of agonizing way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I haven't watched it for a while, so I was also a bit.
Well, I will post also the link to this presentation on the page right below for anyone who's watching this on Integral Life right now.
Yeah. Anyway, so I mean, I wanted to make another point, which was maybe you see a bit here, maybe you see a bit better on the next slide. So I just put very quickly. So
yeah.
We don't use too much, but so like this, for example. And so first, the idea was that we are actually mixing the media, right? So, but then, so the aesthetic idea was that, so we are recounting memories, right? And I mean, this is not just we did it somehow, but so he was supposed to look as much as possible as himself. The dresses we took from the pictures that other people illegally smuggled out of the labor camp, so we could see how the rooms looked, how the clothes looked, and so on, how the head of the policeman looked, and these kind of things. So these are all very as precise as we could get the details. But since they're still memories, we left this like somehow nebulous space around. So yeah, he's recreating his memory, but there's a lot of fog. There's a lot of, and the fog is one of the main leitmotifs in this story as well. And especially when we are doing this, because somehow the animation makes it more real than it maybe is, right? Because we cannot tell for sure that it happened like this, and it's still a journalistic approach. But somehow we want to include it in a way that makes you feel empathy for it. And at the same time, it's a little bit in the aesthetic like a dream. So to clarify that it's just his memory. So that was the concept. Yeah.
I was just appreciating, as I'm looking at this short little video right here, this juxtaposition between that sort of foggy nebulousness in the background versus the actual activity that he's doing in this piece, which is eating, right? Which is the most primal, universal drive that all human beings share, right? That is our most base drive in our, entire spectrum of consciousness, is the hunger drive. And there's an effect, I think, that is conveyed when you see the subject of an article just eating, simply eating. That creates a sort of unconscious empathy. Again, sort of surrounded by this cloudy, foggy, nebulous kind of unknowing. But there's a strong sense of knowing that comes with watching someone fulfill that basic survival need of I need to put food in my body.
The story is worse because they starved him for some days, and so then they had 10 seconds to eat, and so the sound that you hear is somebody counting from 10 to 0 in Chinese, and he has to eat as fast as he can. So that's what was one of them. So yeah,
that just creates that field of empathy that much more, because you can imagine immediately without even thinking about it. You don't even need to see it play out in your own imagination, but you can instantly relate to that idea of I'm starving. I have 10 seconds to eat before someone physically takes this away from me. The frustration that creates is palpable. It hits us on this pre-verbal unconscious level and immediately makes us lean in to the story itself.
Yeah, exactly. And also he said that this is one of the two things that really traumatized him and still triggers him today. So yes, I mean, and this very, very long story, I mean, I guess it's like 90 minutes you need to read it all and watch it all. It starts with the first trauma, it ends with the second trauma.
The other thing I'll notice too, the other advantage of art is that it creates, as much as it can create this immediate empathy, that also comes alongside this, there's a distance, right? Like this is sort of an impressionistic recreation of these memories. And that actually gives you a little bit of buffer, because when you're actually watching the raw footage, it can be overwhelming, right? You can really get flooded with stress and, you know, all that. And it actually makes you, you know, sort of turn your head away, right? You can only take so much of that. But when you even have that little bit of layer of sort of artistic impressionism, it creates just a gap, right? And you can sort of rest in that gap, and it makes you, I think, probably more capable of sticking with, as you say, it's a 90-minute brutal story. And it helps you sort of stay present with that story without turning away, which I think is another really critical use of art in journalism that probably becomes increasingly important as we continue to grow through these stages of development.
Yeah, that is true. And I mean, maybe so one last thing we did to increase empathy. I mean, of course, there's music, but then also there's sound effects. So we did a lot of field recordings while in China, and we put them. Yeah, so this approach, for example, so this was. So we went to his house, which I mean, the story is they took away his house, which belonged to his family for generations. Then, and the whole village had to do the same. So the village had to leave because there's a lake that they want to build there for fresh water. And so then they signed a petition, brought it to the local government, and then they got arrested and put into the labor camp. So, and so this is the road to this village, because his house actually still exists, and it's because this fresh water reservoir, it's when it's raining, it's higher, and when it's not raining for a while, it's lower, and his house is really at the frontier of this. So when it rains a lot, his house is underwater, and when it doesn't rain so much, half of the house is you can still go inside, and that's what we did. And so this is the road to his house. And so so in this part we recorded like him driving with us in the car. So these are actually like the sounds of. Can you hear the sounds?
Yeah, no, I can. It's subtle, so but I can hear them.
Yeah. So the noise of the car, and then when we get out of the car, the field recording changes. I don't know if what that was palpable, but so now you're having so we always try to put the environment, so the ambient sound, behind the scenes that we were describing.
That's huge. That's huge. It doesn't sound like a Foley room. It doesn't, you know what I mean? It doesn't sound like because a lot of places would do exactly that. They would go to a Foley room and they would recreate a lot of these sounds, which can make it sound, quote, better in a certain way, but you lose an authenticity to it. I mean, when you're actually hearing like these were the sounds that we recorded, when we were capturing this footage, it makes it that much more real, that much more powerful, and it transports you that much more easily.
Yeah, and it also, I don't know, so I'm also a musician, so I'm quite an auditive person, I guess, but I think sound makes such a resonance room for empathy, for emotions. So so we try to use this in the story. Okay.
Yep, 100%.
So I stop with this for a moment.
Well, fascinating. Thanks for taking that little sort of side, that little tangent with me, talking about sort of the role of aesthetics in journalism, because it's important, and it's something that again, Spiegel is pretty well known for.
Know that we were, but it's good to know. I mean, the Bush Warriors, but that's maybe not so subtle aesthetic. So.
I think you guys had a couple juicy covers during the Trump administration.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, some were quite good. Yes.